Welcome back to Anomalous Materials, a series analyzing every aspect that makes Half-Life as amazing as it is. Before we get into the game's starting area, it will be helpful to go over the role the player takes throughout the game. Gordon Freeman is the player character and protagonist of Half-Life and its direct sequels. As he is 27 years old in the original Half-Life, which takes place in the year 2000-, we can determine that his year of birth was somewhere between 1972 and 1982. He graduated from MIT with a PhD in theoretical physics and eventually got a job as a Level 3 research associate in Sector C of the Black Mesa Research Facility. We know that he lives in the dormitories of the facility, as that's where he boards his tram at the beginning of the game.
This train is inbound from Level 3 dormitories to Sector C test labs and control facilities.
An intelligent man for sure, but by no means some sort of superhuman beast or action hero or anything like that. Behind the scenes, Gordon originally looked entirely different, using a model now known as Ivan the Space Biker. Despite wearing glasses in most promotional artwork for the game, his model does not portray this. Instead, it gave him a ponytail. Much better. His name was suggested by Valve CEO Gabe Newell as an alternative to writer Mark Laidlaw's original suggestion, Dyson Poncare. Poncare?
Poncare.
The name Freeman, the free man, can be read as a metaphor in itself, which is explored in depth in Half-Life 2 and its episodes.
The free man honors us by his presence. Follow, Freeman.
Gordon has absolutely no personality. He does not speak, he does not react to anything on his own. This plays into the absolutely amazing strategy that Valve uses for immersion in all of their single-player games. You are the character, not like in Zelda where you play a silent protagonist while confined to the generic courageous hero role. Link acts heroically on his own in cutscenes without any player input. But cutscenes don't exist in Half-Life. Any and all storytelling, dialogue, and character interaction happens completely in the engine. The game also provides the ability to kill anybody you see at any time, aliens, military personnel, or even innocent security guards and scientists. Gordon can be played as a hero, fighting to escape and helping people along the way, or a deranged maniac so traumatized by the situation that he mows down anything that moves without a second thought. These actions have consequences, of course. Security guards will shoot back, friendly NPCs will run away in fear. Paths may be closed off, but security guards drop ammunition, which is incredibly helpful earlier on in the game. You are Gordon Freeman, no exceptions, no compromises. Total player control. This system seems to have been abandoned in more recent games, and honestly, I firmly believe that nearly every first-person game could benefit from it. Now, before we could get into the main game, I could never forgive myself if I didn't go over the game's training level, known as the Hazard Course. Essentially, it functions as a tutorial for the game, teaching the player how to move, jump, duck, use the flashlight, fire a variety of weapons, and utilize the friendly NPCs found throughout the game. However, it's presented in a rather unique style. The course is a real location within the world of the game. All of the hallmarks of the Black Mesa Research Facility are here, from the technology to the catwalks to the generally lived-in look that it takes. The guide for the facility is a holographic representation of a woman named Gina, who actually returns for a cameo in Blue Shift and as one of the two playable characters in Decay. This deep integration into the world does result in a few odd lines during the course, some of which are rather humorous.
Walk directly into the ladder, look up, and continue moving forward. If you want to come back down, just move backward.
Continuing the trend of never taking control from the player, the game doesn't remove the weapons acquired during the training course. This means that you are fully capable of killing friendly NPCs in the final area. Upon doing so, 2 turrets will descend from the roof and gun Gordon down, but these can be destroyed with a grenade. The sheer level of attention to detail astonishes me to this very day. Most modern games will simply pause and pull up a list of controls on screen, which is a far more practical and simple way of doing things, but I prefer the charm of Half-Life's method. Now, I didn't really go over the weapons gained in this segment, but I plan to cover them as we progress throughout the main game. I've decided to pretty much go through this chapter by chapter, explaining each one along the way in as much depth as I can. And speaking of, we might as well talk about the first chapter in the game right here.
Good morning, and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel.
Black Mesa Inbound is a very odd sort of beginning to a game like this. It's extremely mundane. It's almost exactly 5 minutes, and it's composed entirely of a ride from the Level 3 dormitories of the facility to the Sector C test labs, and there's very little to do. As boring as it may be, especially on repeated playthroughs, the chapter serves many purposes. For one, it allows the player to become acquainted with the controls before given complete freedom to wander around. Believe it or not, Half-Life was one of the first games to actually use the now standard WASD control scheme as the default for movement. In fact, the leaked alpha version of the game actually uses ESDF instead. Inbound also sets the tone for the rest of the game, a scientific facility deep underground where men in lab coats and security guards wander around busily, living their lives as anyone else in the world. There's a variety of machinery, some clunky robots moving boxes, and a few people on forklifts. It brilliantly shows off just how mundane and realistic a life like Gordon's is, and it makes the game feel far more real than something like Doom, where the layouts of the levels only vaguely resemble something realistic. To illustrate just how truly mundane and boring this world is, one of the first things the player sees is a security guard attempting to get through a door that's broken down. The tram also takes Gordon through a large room with a rocket, and briefly outdoors to see a helicopter. It brilliantly shows off all of the different aspects of the facility and gives an indication of just how unsafe it can be. Inbound also gives the player their first glimpse of a mysterious character known in the game's files as the G-Man, heading in the opposite direction in another tram. Upon finally reaching the end of the line, a security guard opens the door for Gordon before letting him into the first playable chapter of the game and the namesake for this series, Anomalous Materials.
Hey, Mr. Freeman. I had a bunch of messages for you, but we had a system crash about 20 minutes ago, and I'm still trying to find my files. Just one of those days, I guess. They were having some problems down in the test chamber, too, but I think that's all straightened out. They told me to make sure you headed down there as soon as you got into your hazard suit.
As I expected. My God,
Hey,
what are you
that.
doing?
Come on, Gordon. You trying to get me into trouble?
Taking place in, well, the Anomalous Materials laboratory, this chapter further emphasizes just how boring, standard, and real the world is from the moment Gordon steps inside. This is where the game's attention to detail and the gameplay itself begins to show, as the player can mess around with various objects over the course of the chapter.
Get away from there, Freeman. I'm expecting an important message. My God, what are you doing?
The scientists and the security guards can be spoken to, but they aren't really in the mood to chat.
Please, leave me alone until after the experiment.
Hey, catch me later. I'll buy you a beer.
Rather than being a single, linear line through the facility, there are areas completely unnecessary to progression during the first two maps. In one of these, the player can once again spot the G-Man, who has somehow managed to not only make his way to the lab, but arrive before Gordon. During this chapter, the player will make their way to a locker room featuring the names of various Valve employees. It is here that Gordon will acquire the
HEV Mark IV Protective System for use in hazardous environment conditions,
which I'll be referring to as the hazard suit for brevity. This suit serves as the explanation for the player's ability to withstand the damage they'll be taking throughout the game, and it happens to monitor the player's weaponry as well. Throughout the game, the suit will speak to notify the player of how much armor they have, various forms of hazards which are affecting them, and a host of other information. Interestingly, there are several suit lines which are not used in the final game. Check the card above for a video done by the amazing Marfidimus Blackamus for more information on that. I'll be referring to his videos quite a lot throughout the series, as they're all very informative and well made. After acquiring the suit, the player may progress onward throughout the chapter and even deeper down into the facility. In the control room for the test chamber, the scientists brief Gordon on the experiment for the day.
Ah, Gordon, here you are. We just sent the sample down to the test chamber.
We've boosted the anti-mass spectrometer to 105%. Bit of a gamble, but we need the extra resolution.
The administrator is very concerned that we get a conclusive analysis of today's sample. I gather they went to some lengths to get it.
They're waiting for you, Gordon, in the test chamber.
The alterations to the experiment in particular are pushing their equipment much further than usual, to the point of an actual explosion in the next room. Apparently, this isn't an issue worth putting the test on hold for. Continuing downward, Gordon reaches the absolutely massive test chamber and goes through the steps to begin the experiment. Upon sliding the sample into the anti-mass spectrometer, well, I'll just show you this sequence.
Get away from the... Shut it down. No. Shut down.
and after that finishes, the chapter is over. Fun fact, that entire scene was built over a weekend by 2 Valve employees who stayed up for 48 hours straight to get it done. Another interesting note about the chapter itself is that, in early versions of the game, it doesn't exist. The game instead begins in the aftermath of the disaster, which changed when writer Mark Laidlaw suggested that the facility be playable before the experiment, to emphasize just how much is destroyed and changed afterward. And I'm so glad that that change was made, because Anomalous Materials is the perfect way to really introduce the facility to the player, and even make the environment feel like a character itself. The chapter indicates the entire time that something isn't right, something is going to go horribly wrong, yet the scientists almost entirely ignore it.
Now, if you follow standard insertion procedures, everything will be fine.
I don't know how you can say that, although I will admit that the possibility of a resonance cascade scenario is extremely unlikely.
Gordon doesn't need to hear all this. He's a highly trained professional.
It seems like it's meant to parallel the creation of the atom bomb. Did I mention that this game takes place in New Mexico? It's no coincidence. However, talking about the repercussions of the disaster will have to wait for the next episode. Thank you again for taking the time to give this series a look. I actually managed to hit 50 subscribers after uploading the intro. As always, please leave any suggestions or feedback in the comments. I really want to make this series the best it can possibly be.
This should shake up those grand unification boys. My God, what are you doing?
Absolutely.